Hey everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Since Valentine's Day is coming up, I figured I would show you how to make your own heart tote bag, but with patchwork fabric. First, let's draft the heart tote bag pattern. First, I'm just going to freehand one side of the heart, and then I will cut that in half and then mirror that image on the other side. First, I'm going to draw a straight line down the center so that I can match up the top and the bottom and mirror this image easily. Now I'm going to cut out this half. Now I'm going to trace around it for the other edge of the heart, and then I will flip this back and tape it. Next, I'm going to tape my original side, matching these center lines to each other. Now that this matches all up, I will just cut around this side so that I have my pattern. You could also just use the one side that you freehanded and then cut that on the fold. But since we are doing a patchwork heart tote bag, I want it to be all one piece, and then we'll cut the patchwork fabric out of that one piece. And now it's time to do some patchworking. So get all of your scrap fabric and start getting the combinations that you want to put together out on the table, lay it out. I pulled out all of my scraps that I'm going to use, and I did mostly reds and pinks because I wanted to stick with that for the whole Valentine's theme. Now I'm going to iron all these scraps. Next, make your square or rectangle for the patchwork that you're going to do. You could do just the square or rectangle patchworking, or you could do what is called crumb quilting, which is just haphazardly putting pieces together. It's a preference, but today I'm using a 6x6 square. I'm going to cut all of my patchwork squares out at the same time, so I'm going to layer my fabric on top of each other. Now that I have all of my layers, I'm going to lay my pattern piece out and weigh it down. And since I have so many layers of fabric, I'm going to use my electric scissors that cut through a lot of layers of fabric. This likely won't be enough patchwork pieces to make both sides of the tote bag, but I'm going to start with this for now so that I can see how much I need for the rest of the tote bag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a layout of pieces that I like next to each other, then I can pin them and sew them together. This is the layout I like, so I'm ready to iron the pieces and then sew them. And I also am going to lay my heart piece just to make sure that this is going to be wide enough on both sides. Since you will be sewing a lot of squares together to make this patchwork fabric, the best way and fastest way to do that is to do chain stitching through all of your squares. I'll show you. Now that I have one of my lines of patchwork stitched together, without taking that pattern or that fabric out, I'm just going to place this next piece right up under my needle and start sewing. It's a much faster process. It's time to pin your rows together. So flip up one of the pieces onto the other one. I like to make sure that the lines are all lined up, and then put a pin there to keep those seams in place. And once you're all pinned, you can sew them together. For this particular project, we are going to line the bag, but if you weren't going to line your project, then you would want to make sure to overlock all of your exposed seams to make sure they are finished. Now it's time to sew up your second row. Now that you have your two patchwork panels sewn together, you will place them wrong sides together. And try to match up the seams as best as you can. Now lay your pattern piece on top of your patchwork. I'm going to line my middle line up with this middle seam right here and weigh it down. And now you are ready to cut. Now you will cut that same shape out of a lining of your choice. Hey, it's me from the future. Past me forgot to tell you, at this point, you can interface all of your pieces if you want a little bit more structure and sturdiness to your tote bag. I personally want long tie straps, so I'm going to do my straps in a rectangle, and I'm going to cut two of them out, 30 inches long times 2.5 inches wide. But because you're folding that strap in half to cut, you're going to make that strap at least 5 inches wide, and then make sure to add your seam allowance. So if you're going to use 5/8 seam allowance, make sure it's 5 5/8 inches wide. Next, you're going to place your patchwork pieces right side together, and then you will be sewing the edge up, but you want to leave an opening at the top so that you can put things in your tote bag. I am personally going to use this seam as a reference for my opening. So I'll sew all the way along this edge and then leaving open from this seam on, and same on this side. Flip your pieces right side out and make sure all the curves and points are out nicely, and then you will iron all around to make sure the seams are all pressed flat and nice. Now it's time to sew your lining right sides together. All right, we are on day number 2 and we are finishing up our tote bag. Next step, you are going to sew your straps together in half with right sides together, sew them, and sew one edge, leaving one edge open so you can flip it right side out. I like to turn my straps right side out using a loop turner. I find it's the easiest method. So you are going to insert your loop turner into the open edge of your tie and go all the way to the closed edge. Once you're in the closed edge, there's a little hook on this loop turner. You hook it in the edge of the fabric, and then you start pulling the fabric back through itself until you're all done. Now that your straps are sewn, you are going to place them right where the opening is and the stitching stops on your piece, and you will sew it to that raw edge on both sides if you're doing the tie straps. Now that your straps are sewn to the patchwork side of the bag, you are going to tuck this main piece into the piece lining, doing right sides together, and pin all around, and then you will stitch along this top edge, and you want to make sure to leave an opening in the lining so that once you try to pull it right side out, you can pull it through this little hole. Now that your main piece is pinned to your lining piece, you're going to sew, and something to be aware of as you're not pinning all of your pieces together and sewing it closed, you're pinning one lining piece to one main piece to one lining piece so that you have an opening. The reasoning for leaving an opening in the lining and flipping your piece through that is so that you don't have any top stitching. It's seamless on. And the reasoning for leaving an opening in the lining and pulling it right side out through the lining is so that you don't have any top stitching on your bag at all. And the last steps are making sure there's no bulk in the bag and the lining. And then you are going to iron this flat and nice, and then press the entire bag, and we will be finished. And tag me in your finished product because I would love to see your cute combinations. My Instagram and my TikTok are under @KSGarner. If you liked this video, hit that subscribe button so you can watch more of my tutorials. I'm going to continue to post tips and tricks and tutorials every single week to help you learn how to sew.